passionate crowd, and I've never seen that many
One
flags.
player, one tennis stadium, thousands of fans. And suddenly, Toronto didn't seem big enough. Filipino flags were everywhere. People were standing. People were shouting. And every time Alex Eala stepped on the court, the noise exploded. But here's what made the whole thing so strange. Alex wasn't playing in Manila. She wasn't even playing in the Philippines. She was thousands of miles away, in Toronto. So the tennis world started asking one question. Where did all these fans come from? And even more importantly, why does everyone suddenly want to watch Alex Eala? Because this isn't simply a story about a young tennis player winning matches anymore. Something much bigger is happening around Alex. She's becoming the kind of player who doesn't just walk into a stadium. She changes the atmosphere inside it. And Toronto may have just shown the WTA something it wasn't fully prepared for. The Alex Eala phenomenon. But before we get into what happened inside that stadium, if you're following Alex's journey and you don't want to miss what happens next, subscribe to Tennis Hive, because we're following this story as it unfolds. And trust me, this story is getting bigger. Now, let's go back to where this madness really began. Just days before Toronto, Alex Eala was already having the biggest week of her career. She arrived in Washington with something to prove, and she left Washington as a WTA champion. Her first WTA singles title, the kind of victory that can completely change a player's career. But then came another historic moment. The rankings were updated, and Alex Eala climbed all the way to world number 20. Think about that. A young player, still building her name on the biggest stage, was suddenly inside the top 20 in the world. But Alex barely had time to celebrate. Most players would have wanted to stop, rest, recover, enjoy the moment. Alex? She had another tournament waiting. Toronto, a WTA 1000 event. A new city, a new court, a new challenge, and a stadium waiting to see her for the first time. But nobody could have predicted what happened when the fans started arriving. Because Alex didn't walk into an empty arena hoping to build an audience. She walked into a crowd that was already waiting for her. Then the flags started appearing. One, then another, then dozens. And suddenly, sections of the stadium were filled with the colors of the Philippines. Red, blue, white, and that unmistakable golden sun. Toronto was beginning to look very different. It didn't feel like an ordinary tennis night anymore. It felt like a piece of the Philippines had somehow been transported into a Canadian stadium. And that's when this story becomes much more interesting. Because tennis has seen popular players before. It has seen champions. It has seen Grand Slam winners who could fill enormous stadiums. But Alex Eala's situation is different. She's only 21. She's still building her career. She doesn't have decades of Grand Slam history behind her. She doesn't have a long list of major singles titles. And yet, people are showing up for her. They're buying tickets. They're carrying flags. They're cheering her name. And they're making sure she knows something very important. She isn't alone. But why? Why Alex? Why now? That's the question that makes this story bigger than one tournament. Toronto already knows what passionate tennis fans look like. This is Canada. This is a country with a deep tennis culture. Canada has produced major champions. Canadian fans know how to fill a stadium. They know how to support their stars. But what happened around Alex was different. Because these fans weren't simply there because Alex was playing good tennis. They were there because Alex represents something. For Filipino fans around the world, watching a player from their country compete against the best in the world isn't just entertainment. It's personal. It's pride. It's representation. For years, tennis wasn't the sport dominating Filipino sports culture. Basketball had the spotlight. Boxing had the legends. But now a young Filipino woman is walking onto some of the biggest courts in the world. And an entire community is saying, "That's our player." And Toronto heard them. Loudly. Very loudly. But here's where things become even more interesting. Because while thousands of people were filling the stands, Alex still had a job to do. She still had an opponent across the net. She still had to deal with pressure, fatigue, expectations, and the enormous weight of knowing that thousands of people were watching every point. Imagine walking onto a court after the biggest achievement of your career and realizing that an entire section of a stadium is screaming your name. For some players, that pressure could become overwhelming. But Alex didn't have the luxury of thinking about it for long. She had to compete. She had to focus. And she had to prove that the attention wasn't bigger than her tennis. That's what makes her Toronto story so fascinating. The crowd was massive. The expectations were growing. The spotlight was getting brighter. But Alex still had to win the next point. And then the next one. And then the next. This is where the story stops being about popularity and becomes about whether Alex can actually handle the attention that comes with it. Because becoming famous is one thing. Performing when everyone expects you to win is something completely different. And Alex was about to find out exactly how difficult that can be. The pressure was real. The travel was real. The fatigue was real. Remember, just days earlier, Alex had been fighting through an entire tournament in Washington. She had won her first WTA title. She had climbed to world number 20. And almost immediately, she was back on court in another country. There was no long celebration, no extended break, no chance to simply enjoy what she had accomplished. The tennis calendar doesn't wait, and neither did Toronto. But there was one thing Alex had in Toronto that she couldn't have bought, trained for, or planned. A crowd that believed in her. Every cheer became energy. Every Filipino flag became a reminder. Every time the stadium erupted, Alex could see exactly how many people had traveled or waited just to watch her. And suddenly, this wasn't just another match on the schedule. It was a moment for Alex, a moment for Filipino tennis, and perhaps a moment for the WTA. Because if one 21-year-old player can create this kind of atmosphere in a city thousands of miles from home, what happens when she gets even bigger? What happens when she reaches another final? What happens when she plays at the US Open? What happens when more casual American and Canadian fans start discovering her? And what happens when tournaments realize that Alex isn't simply bringing her tennis with her? She's bringing an audience with her. That's a very different kind of power. And Toronto may have just given everyone a glimpse of it. But the biggest surprise wasn't actually the crowd. It wasn't even the flags. And it wasn't the noise. Because after all those fans came to see Alex, something happened next that made the entire Toronto story even more interesting. A decision involving one of the biggest names in women's tennis. A name that changed the meaning of this entire tournament. Venus Williams. And suddenly, Alex Eala wasn't just the young player everyone was talking about. She was about to share the court with a legend. And that's where this story gets even crazier.